All right. Thank you all for coming to this Transportation and Safety Committee meeting. Our agenda is basically one thing, and that is to provide additional detail on the legislation that we have up for its second reading that has the streets identified for using the first installment of the ARPA money. And for me, I wanted to have it just so that there would be an opportunity for the public to see how thoroughly this process was undertaken to come up with the streets. And so with that, whoever wants to have at it and go through an explanation is fine with me.
Good evening. I have some handouts for you. I'm breaking one of Lori's rules, and that's giving you the handouts before I mention it.
Is this pretty much the same as this, the legislation?
Okay, the ARPA paving plan that was outlined for you on October 4 followed the mayor's original guidance for the use of the funds. Those being one-time use of one-time funds. Use must be allowable as determined by the U.S. Department of Treasury. Avoid duplicated use of funds already in place for other projects or programs. And the respective projects must have a community-wide impact. Staff took that and focused on maximizing resources towards repaving the existing roadways. With that guidance in mind, and as the mayor shared with you on October 4, we began our efforts by developing a comprehensive and community-wide residential paving program using approximately $3 million of the ARPA funds. We took the objective review of the Pavement Condition Index Rating, or PCI, map and to identify the residential roads in the worst shape. That initial review was combined with traffic volume, upcoming or planned utility projects, and streets in close proximity needing attention to piece this all together to make an attractive paving project for contractors to bid on. The plan presented to the mayor and council would pave, again, roughly 30 lane miles of residential roads spread across the entire community. The work would include improvements to ADA ramps and curb replacements as needed. And I thought an interesting aspect of this is to perhaps put this into perspective on how much of an impact this plan will have or could have on our community. The city has averaged about 4.36 lane miles paved each year over the last 7 years. So if you look at what we'll be able to do over the next 3 years, we can attack this at a much larger scale. So provided to you today, I printed off another listing of the roads for each year, as well as the map showing all 3 years together. And then I thought it would be interesting too, or helpful for you, the final map has the PCI of the existing roadways, and we've kind of bubbled around the roads that would be paved as a part of this project, as well as some of the upcoming paving projects like Newton Road and South Main are included in there to show kind of a big picture view of this. So with that, I'm happy to take questions or turn it over to Brian or Brad for anything that I can't answer.
I'll start off with an easy one. On the map, you have a dashed black line.
Yep.
I don't think those should be paved.
The dashed black lines, you got it.
Okay.
Some of them we will, though.
That's city limits. I myself am having a difficult time distinguishing the color between failed and satisfactory. I know one's blue and one's kind of turquoise and one's green. If you take a look at let's say, I don't know, give me an example of one of the failed ones.
I don't think we have any failed
I don't-
roads.
I don't see any failed.
Okay,
We have
so-
we have some serious roads
right. The red I
and
can
very
figure.
poor.
Okay. Okay, so there's no failed. Thank you. And if you could give a brief overview as to what the components are for the PCI.
Well, I'll turn that over to Brian or Brad to explain that in greater detail.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Can you state your name too before you?
Brad Holman, city engineer. Basically to determine that PCR rating, I think it was back in 2015 or 16, 14. We hired a firm that drove all the streets in Bowling Green. They basically take a laser scan of the streets, measure crack width, crack depth, and then basically take that stretch of road, the computer, analyze it, score the street, and then give it a rating based on, how many cracks are present, in that stretch of road, how deep it is, just so you know the severity of the crack. If it's just a surface crack, or does it go down, a couple inches into the, into the base asphalt? So then basically all those are scored, and then that map was put together, and that's how we came about to getting the streets on there that are on there is because of, the streets that were needed due to that study. So.
Enough. So has that been updated since 2014, or is it what we're using?
We update it as we pave streets. Like last year, we did Thurston and Flanders. When we update it, we just basically change that color to black and consider that to be, the quote unquote perfect asphalt.
Okay.
So then from that point, then we just been adding to it because we assume that the streets are still degrading back from 2014 if they haven't been paved since then. So we basically just bring it up to a black color. And then,
Okay. So when they're repaved, you reset it basically.
Yep, reset it back to 100%.
So the streets that were chosen were based off of the PCI analysis as of 2014, with
Correct.
the assumption that whatever condition it was in, they would degrade it roughly the same rate.
Yeah, the bad streets are still going to be bad. Is kind of how we go about that. And
I know back in the 1980s, the city was moving toward a street grading system, and I remember the public works director explaining to me that it's not you could basically have a street that had cracks that were not as bad as another street's cracks, but it was in worse shape. In other words, it was the criterion was more than the cracks. And I think, for example, if it didn't have curbs, then the subsurface would degrade more. And so it wasn't just, he took great pains to explain to me that it wasn't just whether the street looked bad. There could be one that looked really bad, but it wasn't the worst. And
right.
so you go after some, and the reason for that is because generally people would look at it that way. So did the PCI include anything other than just the cracks?
Cracks and like let's call it abrasion. Whether if the road is kind of not necessarily cracked, but it's spalled, and there's not as much asphalt in certain areas as others. That took that into consideration as well.
And we have some washboard type streets. Was that included as one of the criterion?
I would think so. I don't know for sure.
Okay, well, that's
I
fine.
would guess that it kind of takes the overall drivability as well.
Okay, so that was a way. It's not an exact science, so that was a way to roughly get an idea of the condition of the streets.
Yep.
Okay, that's good. I appreciate the explanation. Gentlemen, do you have any questions about this?
No, I'm fine.
So once we repave one of these streets, the pavement will last for approximately 20 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, depending on traffic load, 20 years. Yeah, 20 years is probably about average. Hope that's what we shoot for. Like now on State Route 64, that seems like we were paid that every 15. I think it was last paved in 2004. So we were planning to pay that this year. It'll be next year instead. But yeah, state routes, those seem to be not as long, but residential streets at 20, 25 years is what we expect.
15 would be the low end of that spectrum.
Yep.
When the engineering is actually done on the streets, is there, as part of doing that, included look at the curbs and maybe rebuild some of the curbs before paving?
Yep. Yeah, we plan to not only take paving into consideration, but also while we're out there, bring curb ramps up to ADA code, put down the truncated domes, the ADA mats if they're not in place, which a lot of them I think in Quail Hollow are not. So those will all be brought up to code, and then any curb, if there's cracked curbs or grass growing up through it, we'll remove and replace that curb as well.
Okay, good.
And a lot of that was factored into these costs as well.
Good.
We just kind of did a quick run through and said we're going to have some curb work here, so we included the cost for that.
Okay, good. So it'd be curbs, intersection, sidewalks,
Yep.
ADA ramps, and street.
Yeah, sidewalks, it's more just the curb ramps itself we were looking at, not necessarily
Oh,
just
gotcha.
the
Okay.
condition of the sidewalk along the street, but if the curb ramp would need replacement, then we would do that.
Would any of the streets be similar to Clay in that you have the street, which Clay is amazing, the job you did, but also included sidewalks. So is that the type of thing, once you deep dive into getting the engineering, that you'll actually look and see if it would make sense to replace sidewalks?
Yeah, we might look into that. We would, I guess, kind of have to see how, as we get on the street, if we decide that, the whole section of sidewalk in this whole block needs some attention, then we would probably go ahead and take paving dollars towards that. But
Okay.
that would be kind of as we need it. But
As you need it. Okay, good. I appreciate that. And there's been considerable amount of discussion at various levels about complete streets and whatever that is involved with that. And of course, we're in the process of having a study done with that.
Yep.
Are there any streets, I know with the purely residential ones, there's really not as much opportunity or perhaps even need to address that. But is there any streets that come to mind where it would be you would view it as an opportunity to perhaps take some of the money and address some of the complete streets, pedestrian, bicycle, walkway or whatever?
Sure. For a lot of these streets, we're just planning on doing just a straight up mill and fill project, like mill off an inch and a half, put back an inch and a half of surface course. We could, I would say there's always chance if the street has parking on it, we could, take parking away and maybe get room for, we'd make the street one way, maybe we get room for a bike lane or something in there or some sharrows. As far as doing the bike path I don't know if we would have, we could do that, we could definitely do that, but there's no plan for that right now.
So, as part of this, I looked at the Bicycle Safety Commission survey results. There was a few that were ranked for sharrows, and I think there was 2 for a bike path, none of which I think would impact any of these projects. But as you alluded to, as part of the grander Complete Streets review, Manick and Smith is conducting a study right now. Part of that, or the last phase of that, is a community survey to help us work through the decision-making portion of what you're referring to. But then on top of that, don't forget that we're actively looking at the trail from the community center up to Cogan's Crossing to the high school. And then as part of the 2024 paving of South Main, there's a side use path on the west side of Main Street from Gypsy to Napoleon.
Is any of them, thanks, Joe, is any of the money that we're allocating here earmarked to assist with the Cogan's Crossing?
As a part of the $3 million
Yes.
for residential paving, no.
Okay. But we have more money that we will eventually be allocating to various projects.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, grant for that project from that path from the school to Cogan's Crossing, also over to the community center.
And I know there's been
another
a
grant
lot of
that
effort.
is due at the end of January, so we'll get that in there. It's a 90% funding available. So we're hoping it's $1 million project. So if we can get by with only spending $100,000, that's what
Yep.
I'm hoping for.
Yep, I don't even have to use a calculator to get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And so basically, there was a methodical way of determining the streets based on the various criteria. And again, the purpose of this meeting is to allow for that to be communicated in a little bit more detail. And I
Yeah.
think the inescapable conclusion is this was given quite a bit of thought.
And there's a lot of streets on there that, you're like, why wasn't this one considered for paving? And most of the time that's because there's a water sewer project that's still in the works.
Yep.
So we don't want to pave it and then tear it up a year or two, doing water or sewer work and then have to pave it again. So we're trying to be smart with the money.
And that shows. Thank you. Any questions by any of the committee members?
Yeah, I guess speaking more broadly, one of the goals that we've outlined is a one-time use, but this doesn't actually seem like a one-time use. This is all infrastructure that we're going to have to maintain continually. Is there, I guess, how sustainable is our street repaving fund? Maybe this is a larger.
Sure.
Is there any concern that the percentage of our income tax that's currently going to that fund is not adequate to maintain all of this infrastructure when it all comes due again, absent this huge windfall that we've got from federal government?
Well, I guess I would answer the question in trying to pay for paving has been something that the community has had to deal with for a long, long time. I read a speech from Alvy Perkins back in the 1970s, and he looked at the roads, the road miles we had and the paving dollars allocated, and it didn't equate out. It's a problem that probably exists in every community in the state of Ohio. I think we do a pretty darn good job. I think this is going to get us, this is going to catapult us forward many, many years. But no, I don't think that this is going to put us in a position where we're going to find ourselves having to repave $1 million in a particular year. As Brad said, the street life or the life of a street, while I'm a novice, from talking with Brian and Brad, the amount of traffic, the type of traffic that goes on that street is going to degrade it at a different level, depending on where you're at. For example, Flanders, or probably better in the Rosewood neighborhood, those roads are original to the development, and that street was developed in 1986, I think. So we've gotten a pretty good life out of that street. So it's different, as Brad said. Haskins is going to get paved more frequently than a Rosewood, but I think this is a really good plan to get a lot of streets paved that are frankly in need of it.
And the alternative is, if we didn't do this, we'd be further behind. And in this plan, we're not paving new streets.
Nope.
And that would increase, of course, the maintenance. But I can echo and confirm what you said about it being an issue for many, many years. I've told people that when I was on council before, we had this much road and this much money.
Mhm.
Now we have this much road, this much money. And
Yep.
so it's an ongoing concern. I think this is a shot in the arm to help us try and get caught up. And this I also want to confirm that the street life change is different not only with the volume, but I've mentioned before whether there's curbs or not. And so it's not like, and I can understand the concern. Not like in 15 years, we're going to have to go through this all with all of these streets at the same time. It'll probably give us a bit of a window. And a question with the mill and fill. We have the washboard, and some streets almost amusement park quality. Is the mill and fill will take care of that, right?
Yep. And as part of this was a review of the base of
Okay.
the street. So if we needed to go down deeper to address some of that, we would.
Excellent. Any other questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
I really want to thank you, all of you, for coming in. And council meeting nights can be long, and I don't particularly relish making them longer, but I thought it was important enough to get the word out. And so thank you for the work you've done on this, as well as taking the time to enlighten us. And if there's no other questions or comments, I guess I would take one moment to encourage the administration that on the next installment of the federal money, we had a sidewalk commission meeting last week, as Lori can attest. She sat right about there. And we have a similar situation. This much sidewalk that needs work, this much money. Improving sidewalks strategically would meet all of the criteria that were laid out for the use of these monies. And on top of that, improving streets and improving sidewalks is a very important and impactful way to engage in neighborhood revitalization. I mean, all we have to do is look at Clay Street to see that it really spruces an area up. So when you're coming up with your wish list, I would greatly appreciate it if you would give consideration to pouring some of the money into sidewalks. Okay, that's it then. Thank you very much.